The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter had been humanity's mining frontier for 3 decades. But the Kepler mining station had never seen anything like this. Captain Elena Vasquez pressed her face against the reinforced viewport, watching. Her crew's excavation drone circled what appeared to be a massive geometric structure buried within asteroid 2157 Theta. "It's not natural," whispered Dr. Marcus Chun, the station's Zen archaeologist. His hands trembled as he analyzed the readings. "The material composition. It's some kind of living metal alloy that shouldn't exist." Elena's cum crackled with reports from the mining teams below. "Captain, we've got movement down here. The structure, it's expanding." Through the viewport, Elena watched in horror as the asteroid cracked open like an egg. What emerged defied every law of physics she understood. The being stood 40 meters tall, its body a fusion of polished obsidian and gleaming chrome. Ancient. Symbols pulsed along its limbs with soft blue light, and where its face should have been, a void of absolute darkness reflected the cosmos. "First contact protocol," Elena barked into her cum, but her voice carried no confidence. This wasn't the hopeful meeting humanity had imagined. The Titan, for that's what her mind instantly labeled, turned its eyeless gaze toward their station. When it spoke, its voice resonated not through space, but directly into their consciousness. "Inferior constructs. You have awakened us from our contemplation." More asteroids began cracking open throughout the belt. Elena's sensors counted dozens, and hundreds of the massive beings emerging from their eons-long slumber. Each one was unique, yet eerily similar living. Monuments to perfection that made human engineering look like children's toys. "I am Monolith Prime," the first Titan continued, its mental voice carrying the weight of millennia. "We are the Titan Collective, the final expression of evolutionary achievement. We have transcended death, conquered time, and unified consciousness itself." Elena found her voice. "We're humans. We come in peace. Peace." The word echoed through their minds with something approaching amusement. "You fragile creatures speak of peace while your very existence screams suffering. We have observed your kind during our rest. Short lives filled with pain, individual minds trapped in isolation, bodies that decay and fail. The Titan's massive form drifted closer to the station, each movement deliberate and graceful despite its size. "We offer you mercy. A swift end to spare you the agony of your flawed existence. Your species will be remembered as the first to receive our compassion." Elena's heart raced as she realized the magnitude of what they faced. These weren't conquerors seeking resources or territory. They were undertakers, come to bury humanity. Out of pity, her crew looked to her for answers she didn't have. "Send a priority transmission to Earth," she whispered to her communications officer. "Tell them we've found something in the asteroid belt. Something that thinks we're better off. Dead." As the Titan Collective began to move toward the inner system, their living ships of stone and metal casting shadows across the mining station, Elena understood they weren't just facing an enemy. They were facing judgment from beings who had decided humanity's fate before the war even began. The weight of inevitability pressed down on them all. But Elena Vasquez had never been one to accept defeat quietly. 3 months after first contact, the Red Planet had become humanity's first line of defense. General Sarah Martinez stood in the command center of Olympus Base, watching tactical displays that showed the grim reality of their situation. The Titan Collective had methodically dismantled the outer colonies, not through destruction, but through what they called merciful cessation, a process that simply switched off human consciousness as if turning off a light. "They're not trying to kill us," reported Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the military's chief xenobiologist. "They're trying to save us from ourselves. Their weapons don't destroy tissue, they interrupt neural function. They believe death is a gift." Martinez studied the approaching Titan fleet through the base's quantum telescopes. Each ship was a living creature the size of a small moon, covered in what looked like cathedral spires, but functioned as quantum processors. They moved with the unhurried confidence of beings who had never known defeat. Status report, Martinez. Ordered. All conventional weapons proved ineffective, Lieutenant Commander James Park reported. Nuclear strikes, plasma cannons, even our experimental graviton warheads, they simply absorb the energy. Their bodies are made of programmable matter that adapts to any threat. Through the observation deck, Martinez watched the first Titan scout touch down on Mars' surface. The being stood 300 meters tall, its form shifting between crystalline and metallic as it surveyed the human fortifications. When it spoke, its voice reached every mind on the planet simultaneously. I am Apex Eternal. We have come to ease your burden of existence. Do not resist resistance, only prolongs your suffering. But Martinez had been studying the fragmentary recordings from the outer colonies. She'd noticed something the Titans hadn't. In every engagement, there had been moments of confusion when humans acted in ways that defied their calculations. Deploy the Chaos Protocol, she ordered. Her officers exchanged glances. The Chaos Protocol was Martinez's desperate gambit. Instead of coordinated military strategy, they would implement completely randomized tactics. Units would receive contradictory orders, attack patterns would shift mid-engagement, and communication would be deliberately scrambled. The first wave of Titans advanced on Olympus base with perfect synchronization. Their collective consciousness calculated optimal approach vectors, predicted defensive positions, and prepared mercy strikes with mathematical precision. Then Private Ana Rodriguez, a 20-year-old from São Paulo, made a decision that changed everything. Instead of following orders to fall back, she grabbed a mining laser and jury-rigged it to her personal shield generator. The resulting feedback loop created a localized electromagnetic pulse that lasted exactly 0.3 seconds, not enough to damage the Titan, but enough to disrupt its quantum processors. For the first time in millennia, a Titan experienced confusion. Incomprehensible, Apex Eternal's voice carried a note of something that might have been wonder. The construct acted against optimal survival parameters. This behavior serves no logical purpose. That single moment of confusion cascaded through the collective's shared consciousness. Other Titans began hesitating, recalculating, trying to understand the variables they had missed. Martinez smiled grimly as she watched her chaotic tactics unfold. Suicide runs that made no strategic sense, defensive positions that violated every military principle, and weapons combinations that should have been impossible were creating cracks in the Titan's perfect order. They can't predict us, she realized, because we can't predict ourselves. The siege of Mars would last 6 months, and while humanity ultimately lost the planet, they had given the Titans their first taste of uncertainty. In the evacuation shuttles heading for Earth, Martinez carried with her the knowledge that perfection had a fatal flaw: it couldn't adapt to chaos. The war had truly begun. Asterisk. Earth's sky burned with the light of 1,000 artificial suns as the Titan Collective's world ships entered the solar system's heart. In the deepest bunkers beneath the Himalayas, Dr. Amara Okafor worked feverishly on humanity's most desperate project while the surface world prepared for extinction. Neural mapping complete, she announced to the assembled representatives of Earth's remaining governments. I've isolated the quantum signature of human consciousness, the exact pattern that makes us who we are. President Shun Wei of the United Earth Coalition studied the data with grim determination. And this will work, in theory. Amara's voice carried the weight of humanity's last hope. The Titan's collective consciousness operates on quantum entanglement principles. If we can inject chaotic human thought patterns directly into their network ... double quotes above them, the battle for Earth had begun. The Titans descended not as conquerors, but as compassionate executioners. Their towering forms, moving through cities with careful precision to avoid damaging what they saw as monuments to. A tragic species. They had learned from Mars to expect unpredictability, but they still couldn't truly comprehend it. Commander Hassan al-Rashid led the surface resistance from the ruins of New Tokyo. His forces had abandoned all military doctrine, instead employing what he called beautiful madness, tactics so irrational that even their own commanders couldn't predict them. Team 7, I want you to attack the Titan's left foot with nothing but paintball guns, he ordered into his comm. Team 12, start playing jazz music at maximum volume. Team 3, build a sculpture out of car parts and dance around it. The Titan, designated as Culture Keeper, paused in its mercy mission to observe these behaviors. Its vast consciousness struggled to process the human's actions through any logical framework. They waste precious final moments on meaningless activities. It reported to the collective. Yet they do so with evident satisfaction. This phenomenon requires analysis. That moment of hesitation was what Hassan had been waiting for. While the Titan stood frozen in confusion, his real assault teams moved into position. They weren't trying to damage the beings. That was impossible. Instead, they were planting Dr. Okoffer's neural transmitters at strategic points on the Titan's body's dot in her underground laboratory. Amara activated the quantum consciousness interface. The device was humanity's final gambit, a machine that could broadcast human thought patterns directly into the Titan's collective mind. Beginning transmission, she announced. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Titan's perfect hive mind, which had operated in flawless harmony for millions of years, suddenly experienced something it had never encountered: individual perspective. Through the transmitters, they began to feel what it was like to be human. Monolith Prime, the ancient leader of the collective, staggered as foreign sensations flooded its consciousness. For the first time in eons, it experienced loneliness, the terrifying isolation of being trapped in a single mind. It felt fear, not of death, but of insignificance. It experienced hope, that desperate human ability to believe in impossible outcomes. What is this sensation? Monolith Prime's mental voice cracked with confusion. This chaos in our consciousness. These individual thoughts that serve no collective purpose. The collective's synchronized movements began to break down. Some Titans stopped mid-stride, overwhelmed by the sudden experience of human emotion. Others began to question their mission for the first time, wondering if perhaps there was something they had missed about the value of individual existence. But the transmission came at a cost. The quantum interface was burning out Dr. Okoffer's brain, the human consciousness too fragile to sustain such a connection. As she collapsed at her console, her last coherent thought was transmitted directly into the Titan's collective mind. We may be mortal, but we are not meaningless. The war had reached its turning point. The Titans, for the first time in their existence, were experiencing doubt. And in that doubt, humanity found its greatest weapon, the ability to make others question certainty itself. The battle for Earth's future would be decided not by strength or technology, but by the power of perspective. The Titan collectives. World ships hung motionless in Earth's orbit, their vast forms darkened as if in mourning. For the first time in their million-year existence, the beings who had achieved perfect unity were experiencing discord. Dr. Okoffer's neural transmission had introduced something viral into their consciousness. Individuality. Deep within the Yasten primary world ship, Monolith Prime struggled with sensations that had no name in the collective's ancient language. The feeling of being alone in one's thoughts was so alien that it threatened to tear apart the quantum bonds that held their civilization together. Report status, Monolith Prime commanded, but its voice lacked the absolute authority it had carried for millennia. 17% of the collective is experiencing deviation, reported Nexus 7, its mental voice tinged with something that might have been confusion. They question the Mercy mission. They speak of concepts like beauty and meaning that serve no logical purpose. On Earth's surface, the remaining human resistance watched in amazement as the Titans began to behave erratically. Some had stopped moving entirely, lost in contemplation of their newfound individual thoughts. Others had begun to create building, strange sculptures from debris, composing patterns of light that served no function except to be observed. Captain Elena Vasquez, now leading the United Earth Resistance, saw the opportunity. They're experiencing what we call an identity crisis, she explained to her assembled commanders. Their perfect unity is breaking down, but we can't just wait for them to self-destruct. We need to push them over the edge. The plan was audacious. In its simplicity, instead of fighting the Titans, humanity would teach them. Small groups of volunteers would approach the confused beings and share the most human experiences they could imagine: art, music, love, loss, and the bittersweet beauty of mortality. Maria Santos, a former teacher from Barcelona, was among this first volunteers. She approached a Titan that had been standing motionless for hours in the ruins of her city. The being, who had designated itself as Query Infinite, had been overwhelmed by the concept of curiosity, the human drive to seek knowledge for its own sake. I don't understand. Query Infinite's mental voice was barely a whisper. In my newfound individual thoughts, I desire to know things that will not aid survival or efficiency. I want to understand why humans create beauty when it serves no purpose. Maria smiled, pulling out a worn photograph of her daughter. This is my child. She died in the first attack on Earth. Logic would say, mourning her serves no purpose. She cannot be restored. But I carry her memory because love transcends utility. The Titan's massive form trembled as it processed this information. Through the quantum link, Query Infinite shared this revelation with the collective, and the virus of human perspective spread further. But not all Titans were embracing their new consciousness. A faction led by absolute certainty rejected the human contamination, viewing it as a disease that threatened their perfect existence. They began to purge the affected members of the collective, causing the first civil war in their species' history. Battle between the Titans was unlike anything humanity had witnessed. Beings of living stone and metal fought with weapons that bent space-time itself, their conflict tearing holes in reality. But the most devastating attacks were philosophical absolute certainty's faction tried to restore collective consciousness by force, while the individualized Titans fought to preserve their newfound freedom to think independently. In the midst of this chaos, a small group of humans led by Dr. Chun made a discovery that would change everything. Deep in the ruins of the Kepler mining station, they found the Titan's original awakening chamber. Ancient inscriptions revealed the truth. The Titans had not always been immortal. They had once been individuals like humans, but had sacrificed their mortality and individuality to achieve perfection. They've forgotten what they gave up, Chun realized. They chose collective consciousness to escape the pain of being mortal individuals. But they've also forgotten the joy. The revelation spread through both the human resistance and the fragmenting Titan collective. Some Titans began to remember fragments of their ancient individual lives, memories of love, loss, hope, and dreams that had been subsumed into the collective eons ago. As the Civil War raged in the void above Earth, humanity prepared for the final phase of their impossible war. They would not defeat the Titans through strength or cunning, but by reminding them of what they had once been and what they had lost in their quest for perfection. The weight of inevitability was shifting, and for the first time since the war began, humanity dared to hope. The final battle took place not on any world, but in the quantum space between thoughts where the Titan collective's consciousness resided. Captain Elena Vasquez, her mind linked to the experimental neural interface, found herself standing in a vast digital realm where concepts took physical form and emotions shaped reality. Before her stood Monolith Prime, but the ancient being was no longer the perfect entity that had emerged from the asteroid belt. Cracks of light ran through its form individual thoughts, breaking through the collective consciousness like flowers through concrete. "You have destroyed us," Monolith Prime said, its voice carrying both accusation and wonder. "We were perfect. We were unified. We were immortal. You were dead," Elena replied, her human perspective causing ripples in the quantum space around them. "You achieved perfection by giving up everything that made existence meaningful." Around them, the battle between the Titan factions raged. Absolute Certainty's followers fought desperately to restore their collective consciousness, while the individualized Titans defended their right to think, feel, and question. The conflict was tearing apart the very foundations of their civilization. But Elena had not come to fight. She had come to offer a choice. "Dr. Chun found your origin records," she said, conjuring the ancient inscriptions in the digital space. "You were once like us individuals who loved, created, suffered, and dreamed. You chose to become collective because you feared death and loneliness. But you also gave up joy, wonder, and the beauty of imperfection." Monolith Prime's form flickered as buried memories surfaced. For a moment, Elena saw glimpses of who it had once been, a being not unlike humanity, struggling with mortality and meaning. "I remember," Monolith Prime whispered. "I remember the terror of being alone with my thoughts. But I also remember the first time I watched a star be born, the way it felt to create something beautiful that would outlast my physical form. The love I felt for another individual, unique and separate from myself." The quantum space around them began to stabilize as more Titans accessed their buried memories. The civil war slowed as beings on both sides paused to process these revelations. "We offer you a choice," Elena continued. "Not the false choice between collective consciousness and individual existence, but the human choice to embrace both connection and independence, to find meaning in mortality, and to create beauty in the face of inevitable ending. Absolute Certainty, materialized in the digital realm, its form rigid and unchanged. This is contamination. These emotions make us weak. Individual consciousness brings suffering. It also brings growth," Elena countered. "Pain teaches us compassion. Mortality gives weight to our choices. Uncertainty drives us to explore and create. Your perfection was stagnation. The choice rippled through the collective. Some Titans, terrified of the chaos of individual thought, retreated to the furthest reaches of the galaxy, maintaining their collective consciousness in isolation. Others chose to embrace their rediscovered individuality, beginning the slow process of learning to be themselves again. But the majority chose something unprecedented, a hybrid existence that honored both their collective wisdom and their individual perspectives. They would remain connected, but not controlled, unified, but not uniform. Monolith Prime stood at the center of this transformation, its form now a dynamic balance of stone and light, permanence and change. "We understand now," it said. "We sought to grant you mercy by ending your suffering. But we failed to comprehend that your suffering was not separate from your joy. It was the context that gave joy meaning." As the neural interface began to fail, Elena felt herself being pulled back to her physical body. But before she left the quantum realm, she offered one final gift to the Titans, the complete recorded history of humanity, with all its beauty and tragedy, triumph and failure. "Learn from us," she said. "Not how to be perfect, but how to be alive." The war ended not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. The Titans who chose to remain in the solar system became humanity's unlikely teachers, sharing their vast knowledge while learning in return about the meaning found in finite existence. Captain Elena Vasquez returned to Earth to find a world forever changed. The remaining human population faced the monumental task of rebuilding, but they did so with the knowledge that they had achieved something unprecedented. They had taught immortal beings the value of mortality. In the years that followed, human philosophers and Titan consciousness architects worked together to explore the deepest questions of existence. They discovered that the weight of inevitability and knowledge that all things must end was not a burden to be escaped, but a gift that gave every moment its preciousness. The war had taught both species that perfection was not the goal of existence. The goal was to live fully, love deeply, and create meaning in the brief time given to conscious beings in a vast and indifferent universe. And in that lesson, both humanity and the Titans found something more valuable than victory. They found purpose. Asterisk.